Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Changing the Climate, a show where we talk about the changing world around us and how we can make it better. Brought to you by Climate Change Realty. The only real estate brokerage that donates 50% of its net commissions to 501c3 nonprofit organizations dedicated to fighting climate change. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. Of course, I'm always delighted to welcome my guest, Jennifer Menke.
Hello, everyone.
Really glad to have you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining us. Excited for this one, as I am every single week. And of course, we always love to get the show started with a little bit of background on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation and for hosting this. So I'll try to be succinct with how I got to be where I am right now. But yeah, it really, for me, started at a pretty young age, with being passionate about protecting the environment. And part of that was because of a favorite childhood place that I would go to all the time being developed. And I'm sure a lot of people have those stories of, having that deep connection to land and then having a developer come in and develop it. And so that really sent me on the just passionate path of protecting the environment. And then, when I got to college, I was actually really wanting to get into environmental law and kind of go that direction. But I did a study abroad and I had some really powerful encounters with different indigenous people. And then I went to Guatemala and lived with some Mayan women, primarily studied with Mayan women, and was there for about a month. And that really just opened up my eyes to how much in the culture that I come from, people they're not aware of their connection with nature. And when I was working with these indigenous people, I was seeing their relationship with nature was very different. And because of that, they were taking care of the environment in a very different way. They had this innate happiness as well within them, even though they were living, most of them, in poverty. And it really struck me. And so I came back from that, with this theory that actually maybe the root cause of environmental destruction was due to humans' lack of awareness of their connection to all life. Because if we understood that connection to all life, then we most likely would not be destroying it to the point where it actually, because we would realize that destruction of it actually eventually would come back to harm us and our families, right? Because it's
Mm-hmm.
all circular. So then I also I also came back to Colorado and then met an indigenous elder from the Taos Pueblo tribe. And she really kind of helped open up that door in this area to connecting to nature. Because then I was like, okay, if that's my theory, then I need to understand how to connect myself back to the earth, bring that awareness back and explore what that means, and then I ideally would help others do the same. So I worked with her and then also met John P. Milton about 18 years ago and started doing these nature-based retreats with him and fell in love with that process. And he was an environmental activist and then had kind of the same theory of actually the root cause is people's lack of awareness of this connection. So he developed these retreats where you teach awareness based, and these are the sacred passages. You teach awareness based practices to people, and then put them out on a 7-day solo in nature, and then come back and they do this integration. And so I did this work with him and had some really profound experiences And so I decided to train with him. So I apprenticed with him and trained with him for over 7 years. He's still someone I work with. But in that training, I had to do 44-day solitary retreats, 28-day solitary retreats.
What does that
And that
mean?
was,
Solitary
it means
retreats.
like, it means like being out in nature and staying in about like 108-foot diameter circle for an extended period of time. So from like 7 days all the way up, I was doing 44 days. So you can imagine like not hiking around, not exploring, just staying in this one place and meditating and,
Wow.
doing some of the practices that we were taught and trained, which, was meditation. It was these sensing awareness practices. It was Qigong. And the purpose was really not only to kind of let go of our, like, to shift, I would say, our consensus understanding of everything, so it helped us to come into this much deeper state of awareness and to come into more of a non-dual state of connection with all that exists.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand how our mind functions, because when you're sitting out there all by yourself, you start to really become aware of how your mind works and everything, and how it projects onto the environment. And you understand like how you create stories that, are just kind of just spun from nothing. And, so you really get familiar with your mind and how your mind functions. And then you start to also resensitize your senses. So when you're out there and you're not bombarded by the static of everyday life, like your senses start to open up, and then you start being able to understand and, yeah, connect with a lot more, because the sensory awareness is much more expanded and open. So anyways, like I worked with John for a long time. I still do sacred passages with John. And so eventually I started running, retreats and leading these retreats for others to have these kinds of connections and experiences. And a
Sure.
lot of times people would go back, to their lives and really create change in their personal lives as well as their work lives. And when there's that connection, there's also this profound love that happens. So when you love something, you tend to take care of it. And so when you have these experiences of, your heart opening up, this deep connection, there's a natural desire to take care of it. So people would go back and want to take care of the earth. And but I was also realizing, like, for a lot of people it was difficult to go back to their lives. And then you have these systems that have been created by humans, like the
Mm-hmm.
economic system, political system, all these social systems. And so these seeds would be planted in people, they'd go back, and it was so hard for those seeds to really germinate and grow, because the systems that they went back to
They
were
plug back
not
in.
kind of conducive. Yeah, it's like soil, the soil was not conducive for the seed to germinate and grow. And so that's when I started getting into more of the external systems change work. And I really believe that we need to do both the internal work and the external. And so I created the nonprofit Regenerative Earth. I was also nominated as an emerging global leader for the Academy for Systems Change and was brought into that fellowship. So they really mentored me. And they're made up of, just some of these senior thought leaders of systems change, like Peter Senge and Otto Scharmer, and, these guys that are really, really brought the idea of systems change, I think, into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I was mentored by them, started the nonprofit, and I did this retreat in Costa Rica and had this really profound vision that to help protect this ecosystem, because it was such an important biologically diverse ecosystem. Like the Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica, where I did the retreat, holds 2.5% of the world's biodiversity. And like it has 700 different species of trees, which is all of North America, combined, trees in North America. And then National Geographic named it the most biologically intense place on earth. And I went out for a 7-day solo in the rainforest, and had this, then I asked the rainforest, like, how can I get back to you? And I just had this profound message of like, help protect it. And this white hawk flew overhead and it landed on this branch. And it was just, this affirmation of help protect it. And the place where I was, there was a White Hawk Foundation, which was committed to conservation in the area. So, the timing synced up where I entered into the academy. I started this nonprofit to house this systems change work. And so I started on a project down there to address, some of the deforestation and the destruction to the environment and potential destruction to the environment, as well as to address poverty down there. And that's a whole nother story, but that's pretty much like how I got into, this work. And so now it's really, it's that weaving of doing the external, systems change and internal systems change.
Yeah.
Also
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa. So what I want to say right off the bat is I love talking to like regenerative minded people. Like when I talked to Phil Taylor from Mad Ag and I asked him, who are you? And how'd you get to be doing what you're doing? He gave like a very similar, like synodic response, just like you just told your whole backstory. And it's so amazing. And it vibes with me so much, but we're going to dig into like every little bit and piece of what you kind of just talked about, including Academy for Systemic Change, of course, Regenerative Earth. But I guess where I want to start is like, when you say you had a vision, can you kind of explain that a little bit deeper? What does that mean to you? And I just wanted to clarify, are you from Boulder, Colorado, or where are you from?
Yes, I was living in Boulder for about 20 years, but I'm actually currently residing in Cozumel, Mexico.
Okay. But you're from Boulder, like originally, right?
Originally, no. So I was born in Washington, D.C. Sorry.
Okay.
Lived
No
in
problem.
Bethesda, Maryland,
Oh, East
moved to
Coast.
Lake Forest,
Okay.
Illinois, and then spent high school in Upper Arlington, Ohio. And
All right.
then moved out to Boulder for college.
Cool. Yeah. So what you say you had a vision? What does that mean to you? Can you explain it to people who might not understand?
Yeah, it was well, when you're alone for 7 days, like, your mind, and you can enter into these visionary states. And so for that, it was, I would say it's your intuition, and when you're in a deeply connected place, I believe it's your intuition coupled with the connection with the environment. So if you can imagine your mind and your body being not just separate, but being highly connected to a whole ecosystem, a vision can come in that is, I feel, much greater than you. It's kind of coming through you, but it's something that is a communication from the whole in some ways. I don't know how else to explain it, but yeah, it's really seeing through more of a clairvoyant space. Either it can be visual or auditory or kinesthetic, and kind of having this intuitive insight in whatever way it comes through, in whichever sense, it's coming through.
Yeah. No, very, very amazing. Always love to ask. I consider myself a very visionary person as well. What I want to ask you real quick is, when was the last time you visited somewhere like DC or New York City or like somewhere like Mexico City? And like, how did you feel compared to like these other like sacred passages that you've experienced, like going and then like plugging into like the natural world and then plugging into like the human built, systemic cement stuff? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually just in Mexico City less than a month ago. So,
Okay.
yeah, I have my ways of connecting. So I always try to figure out what is the avenue to, have a root, have a connection. And it's hard for me to be in those environments for an extended period of time. But for limited periods of time, it's fine. But I definitely, and it depends on what city, and if you have parks nearby and all of that. I do believe that, and I work with people helping them connect with nature in city environments. So I
Hmm.
believe it's possible. It's just you kind of have to work a little bit harder. And yeah, and you have to really filter out a lot of the static and kind of bombardment on the senses. But if you're coming from like a solo, from really immersing yourself in nature and then going to a city, it can little bit intense. Yeah.
For
So it
sure.
can be definitely a bombardment on the senses.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me how some people, like I have a friend who's born in New York City, he's lived there his whole life, but he also, I used to go to summer camp with him and he would like run around in the woods with us for 7 weeks and like have the time of his life there. It's crazy how we've created these built environments that are just completely unnatural to the way we used to live, and it's totally based on, I don't even know what it's based on, but we're not going to get into cities. What I really want to hear about is like, what is your nonprofit Regenerative? What do you guys do? Like, what's the goal of the organization? Like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, the goal of the organization is really to say to support life, the environmental and social just communities, support the healthy future, of these really, I would say, keystone ecosystems globally. I mean, right now I'm pretty focused in the Americas and may stay that way, but it's really a global vision for enhancing, the environment, continuing to support the health of these places. And then we do that through three different modalities. And I kind of see it as the mind, the body, and the spirit. So it's, the mental part of that is really the systems change work. It's being able to analyze the systems of an area effectively so
Mm-hmm.
that you can understand what the root drivers of dysfunction are, and then you can effectively choose the intervention points. And so it's similar to the human body. If you're a doctor, you're going to want to know the systems in order to effectively diagnose it and then to treat it, right? So that's the more mental part of it. And we have had to focus on more the economic systems because that is a huge driver in environmental destruction and poverty and inequities in general. And so that is kind of a key lever to focus on. And then the land kind of body part of it is more the land stewardship. So helping to protect land when it's needed, when it's under the threat of being developed, or polluted, whatever it is, like effectively protecting those places, and then also doing plans for stewardship for those places. And then the third piece is more of the spiritual aspect, which is doing retreats. So, guiding people in the areas that we work in, helping them connect with that land, also with the people, with the projects, and some of the programs are focused on investors, some are with leaders, so it's really catered to the group that we're bringing in. And the purpose is to have kind of that inner transformation experience, but then to also experience what's possible, by
Mm-hmm.
meeting these people, these projects, and connecting with these environments and ecosystems.
Very, very cool. So let's talk about how this would work on a more like practical level. Can you explain how your like regenerative economy lab program works?
Yeah, so we're working now in several different areas, but I'll just focus on the OSA just to make it kind of much easier to understand.
Mm-hmm.
But with the OSA, we First, we're initially asked
Is that the
to
Costa Rican
convene.
forest, the Osa?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The Osa Peninsula is in Costa Rica. It's in the southwestern part of Costa Rica.
Mm-hmm.
And we were originally asked to convene the funders for this region so that there could be more cohesiveness in financing different projects for kind of this healthy future. And my team decided we needed to do a systems analysis in order to understand if that really, well, in order to even do that work of guiding funders, right? We need to understand what was happening. But we also wanted to understand what are kind of the what does a community want? What's their vision, and how can we understand what's happening down there better so that it can inform our actions of how we can be most effective. So we did a comprehensive systems analysis for the region. It took us about 9 months, and
Wow.
we interviewed all stakeholder groups, conducted small workshops, all of that. And so it's most comprehensive from what the locals say. It's most comprehensive analysis of the systems in the region to date, and it really highlights some of the major kind of barriers and to this regenerative future. And then it also highlights this collective vision that we heard from every stakeholder group, and that vision is having blue green economy that is really fed by these sustainable livelihoods, and then that helps to provide more local income to the people. And then the people, because their jobs are reliant on a healthy ecosystem, are incentivized to take care of the ecosystem. And it creates this virtuous feedback loop where you have these sustainable livelihoods, again, that creates a blue green economy, and that circle just keeps strengthening, right? And part of that vision came from there's a lot of poverty down there,
Mm-hmm.
and actually the poverty was being driven by restrictions to the land, and their conservation restrictions, but it didn't allow the people to be able, like, you can't have conservation alongside poverty, because what that drives people to do is they will go and do illegal activities in order to make a living. So like, if you have a big national park and there's not much money from that national park going to the local community, and the local community is really poverty stricken, they're going to go in and illegally hunt. They're going to illegally log. They're going to illegally mine. They're going to do a lot more illegal activities. And if there's no enforcement of those illegal activities, then you start to get this slow chipping away at the rainforest. And then there's, the areas that aren't protected, which have the potential to be unsustainably developed. And that would just ruin the ecosystem forever, right? Because this is
Mm-hmm.
just primary ancient forest. And once that's gone, that's gone. It takes, that forest has taken hundreds of years to develop and to grow. And so, you cut that down and you're losing so much. Anyway, so we had that high level vision, and then we also identified what would be the intervention points to support this vision and to decrease kind of the size and the driver of these barriers. And it's a very complex map. But what happened from that is there was a territory that was formed for the Osa Peninsula when we were doing this work. And when a territory is formed in Costa Rica, they have a territorial council. And the first couple meetings, the territorial council, they invited us in to do a presentation, on the systems map, so that it helped everyone come together around a consensus understanding of this is what's happening in the region. This is the vision that we all are saying we have. And these are potential ways to support and actualize that vision. So we've been working with them, to help support this vision. And right now there are a number of things that have come out of this, but like right now we're working on a capacity strengthening program, kind of like an incubator for businesses and nonprofits and projects, and supporting kind of these high impact projects and leaders that are going to, help address some of these issues and also support sustainable livelihoods and support this region of vision. And those projects
Mm-hmm.
span, they're across sectors. So it's, agriculture, region of agriculture, ecotourism, conservation, just healthy forest management, land acquisitions. It really spans across sectors.
Yes. So Regenerative Earth is an American-based organization, right? It was founded in the US. So
Yeah, yeah.
how have you found like the locals responding to like a foreign entity coming in and trying to like help their environment? Any stories that stick out in your mind? What's like the reception been
Yeah.
like? Because you're trying to take care of their land, but you're coming in with like your ideas. I'm just curious how the people are responding to this.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. So we're always invited, it's always a pull rather than a push. Like I'm not going to push ideas on anyone. Even the systems map it's the people's map, it's all the information they gave us. We just put it into a sophisticated visual to help understand all the connections, between sectors. And so this capacity strengthening program, for instance, the government branch of rural development approached us about it being something that was really needed and they'd like our help with it. So that's why we're doing that. With other projects we're working on, we're being hired by Costa Rican foundations to do the consulting work. So we're working in a couple of other areas, but that's by contract. It's contracted work. So, we're kind of like with the OSA, we raise money for it because it's the local people who are asking us to do it. Whereas some of these other areas, it's these foundations that are from Costa Rica or from wherever we're working in that are asking us to help with this work. And it's because, and then my team is made up of pretty much all Latinos. So I'm the only US person. But we
Cool.
also are, like before when we did the map, it was like we didn't partner with any big NGOs or, and it was just, we just really try to be neutral conveners. So it's really not about pushing ideas, but about listening and supporting, what's needed with the expertise that my team has to offer. Yeah.
Awesome. So it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like the most profound experiences in your life have been these trips you've taken into nature, or what did you call it? Like isolation. What were they called again? When you're just alone in the woods?
The Yeah, so nature solos is what I call
Yeah.
them.
Okay. So that's what you call them. So I wanted to ask you, I saw that you gave a talk about how to cultivate like a sacred relationship with the natural world. It seems to me like that sacred relationship has come to you through your personal experiences going out into nature. Is there any way that we can do that? Let's say maybe we live in New York City, or maybe we live in, I don't know. I mean, I guess the, cornfields could be nature, but like how can individuals cultivate this sacred relationship with the natural world and get the respect to actually go out and then take action to make the world better?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's really just it's like any relationship, right? You have to give it time. So for one, it's not going to happen overnight. Secondly, you really just like even if you're in a city, there are trees in cities, there are plants, there that just even the air, the element of air, that's something that is natural, right? You connect with the sun. I mean, everyone connects with the sun. Like there are ways to connect with kind of nature, the non-human influenced things, right? And humans are part of nature too. I really see that. But I think, you know, just giving it time and just sitting with a tree or standing outside and connecting with the sun or connecting with air and relaxing, being present with it. That's just a simple way to cultivate that. And then over time, it becomes really profound, some of the experiences that you can have in nature. And especially if you're going to the same place, like if you're in a place where you're able to have access to a very natural setting, to go there consistently and connect like you would a relationship, to be open to listen. The environment actually starts to get familiar with you, and you start to have closer encounters with species, and there's a strength to that happens internally, where you connect to something much greater than yourself. Like we can get so caught up in the me
Mm-hmm.
and our immediate circle of friends or family, whatever. And this just helps you connect with something much greater. And especially like even sitting outside at night under the stars, like we're just like these little specks of sand in the universe. So
Amen.
yeah.
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 Well, Jennifer, I'm with you. I spent a lot of my youth like climbing in the Adirondacks. I have a very profound connection to nature. But what I want to say is I just spent like 6 hours creating some Instagram posts, and people will click through them, and like we're in this like immediate gratification society, and like the capitalism is like, we've been conditioned to consume advertising, and advertisements, you have to, they say if you don't catch someone's attention in like zero point 0.8 of a second, like you can lose them. So how can we kind of get someone who's grown up in that environment to connect with nature? But I guess what I really want to ask you is, how can we like create conditions that promote environmental stewardship but also work in a capitalist society or a short attention economy?
Mm. Yeah, it's a great question, because I mean, I even find
It's tough.
myself having a harder and harder time staying out in nature for longer periods as technology progresses.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's because of that, instant gratification. But it's so worth letting go of the technology and just stepping out and being in nature, and also like calming your mind. I mean, there's like your heart opens, and I can't like you have to experience it to
And
understand
I
it,
know,
but
I
the
know what you
longer
mean.
you go, yeah, I mean, your heart just naturally opens, and there's this joy that comes in. Whereas like when we're on, our phones and we're trying to get, we're completely subjected to like, oh, that person didn't like my post and I didn't get enough likes. And then you have like a horrible day. And then like, you have a ton of likes and you feel great about yourself, and you're just on this roller coaster. Whereas like when you're out with nature, it's you're not subject to all of that, and you're able to just really be in this and it's super nourishing. It's nourishing in a whole different way than technology, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
mhm.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create clickbait content that attracts people, and then I'm going to tell them to go do what you just said. Cuz I've seen both sides of the coin. Like I've like enjoyed like consuming like the crap, but then then I go for a walk at the park and I'm just like, wow, this feels like so much better. So it's like you got to work with both. And I think that like a lot of companies aren't saying this kind of stuff. And I hope this message continues to grow, but I don't see any other way around it besides using the tools that are proven to work. But those are just my
Mhm.
thoughts. I want to dig
Yeah.
into
No,
like some, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. You're like, I concur. So
Yeah, I concur.
what I
Exactly.
kind of want to dig into is a little bit big picture now, like the difference between having like regenerative practices, like your organization's called Regenerative Earth. And I think what's like big in style right now is this sustainability, which is being able to continue doing what you're doing now without destroying. I love the idea of regeneration, not only perpetuating the current system, but creating, not even creating, utilizing the natural system that already exists that creates life, which creates more life and is an actual positive feedback loop, because we've got the positive feedback loop in the north that's melting all the ice, but we could create a positive feedback loop that creates more life. So why do you think we are so focused on sustainability and there's not much talk of regenerating the planet?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think it's really dependent on the circles that you surround yourself with, right? So for me, I actually feel like the hype and the talk now is around regeneration. I very, very rarely hear people talk about sustainability, but I think it's really, who you're surrounding yourself with. And probably for the most part, there's more talk about sustainability than regeneration. But
Mm-hmm.
sustainability is, I mean, just in the word, you have sustain, right? So you're sustaining life rather than with regeneration. It's you're supporting the regeneration of life, and nature regenerates itself, right? It's not it circulates resources and it's constantly growing and dying, and there's this cycle that happens, but it's a regenerative cycle naturally. Whereas when you're sustaining things, for right now, it's not good enough. And I'm just going to be bold about it. Like, I mean, with the report that just came out a couple of weeks ago about the state of our climate, and that it's irrefutable that that humans are the cause of it. Climate change, to sustain what is happening right now is not good enough. It's not going to be enough, and we have to regenerate some of the ecosystems that we've destroyed, for one. And we have to support the regeneration, the natural regeneration of ecosystems that are still in a healthy state. And so yeah, I mean, that's why I love the word regeneration, because I think it captures more of the natural cycles of things. And it's what we have to do, in order to get, the state of the planet in a healthier place.
Bless. Love it. How can we use what we already know about the natural system to create a society that works for all the living things in the biosphere?
Yeah, I mean, so if you just look at the circulation of resources, I mean, there's nothing that goes to waste in nature, right? Everything is recycled, reused, repurposed. And we design things to be thrown away, right? And we just think they're going to go away. And so that's a fundamental flaw in our design of products. So right there, just addressing the products that we create, and how we can repurpose, reuse, recycle, regenerate, just
Zero
with
waste economy.
products. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, even with finance. So you see, finances being, I would say, hoarded, and with different people, with different organizations. And it's like water, right? When you create a dam with that, and you're pooling the water in one area, but then that water is not able to go down the river to provide the nourishment, to all these other species, right? And their detrimental impacts that dams have. Colorado River, for instance, it barely makes the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of California, or reaches the Gulf of California. And it's super damaging to all the ecosystems downstream. And so when you have finances that are pooled and dammed in certain areas, then it's not providing the nourishment to the rest of life, right? And so just the capacity to not be so greedy, and to not be hoarding so much, and to allow finances to flow more freely. That's another way that would mimic nature, in terms of just resources flowing. And yeah, but I think that, just the idea, the biggest thing, honestly, is the creation of products, and even building houses, like all these things that we create, and not having that that vision of how it can be recycled and reused,
Hmm.
because nature doesn't do that. Everything is repurposed. Everything has a purpose. Whereas like we design things that we just think it has an end life. It's very linear. We design it, it's no good anymore, and then we throw it away. But that's not how nature works. And so that's how we're really screwing things up in that
Sure.
sense.
Yeah, that analogy was very interesting for me as I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to think about how would I incentivize someone who's damming the water and hoarding all the water or the wealth to themselves to change and like actually do something more natural, which is sharing resources with everything. I mean, people hate the idea of communism, and the socialism is growing in popularity in this country, but obviously we try to avoid politics as much as we can on this show. But what that got me thinking of is another question. Yeah, I try my best. Climate. I'm trying to focus on like the
Good.
economic. Yeah, I
Right.
try to focus on like the economic solutions to climate change. But we
Mhm.
inevitably end up dipping our toes into certain things. But that got me thinking of another question I wanted to ask you: is how do you see the idea of regeneration as similar to something that I'm like a school of thought that I'm completely obsessed with, which is this idea of enlightened self-interest, which is always considering others before yourself is the best way to serve yourself at the deepest and most fulfilling level. Now, diehard capitalists will think I sound like a moron, but I've been living this motto as who I am for like a couple years now, and I can easily say I'm the happiest I've ever been. So I just wanted to see how you could kind of relate the way I think to like the idea of like the way
Mhm.
you think with regeneration.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great philosophy. And one thing you have to be careful about with that is just making sure that you don't take care of other over oneself. So it's a both and, right? Like,
Huh?
but thinking about others, and doing and supporting others, but also thinking about self, right? And supporting self. Like yourself has to be also a part of that equation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's super yeah, it helps us get out of our kind of me mentality, right? And it's the same, it goes to nature, like taking care of nature, and knowing that that will benefit oneself in the long run. But again, like not doing it to the extent where you're actually harming yourself, because yourself, you are part of nature as well, and you also need to nourish yourself too. So it's just, yeah, being kind of supporting the whole, inclusive of oneself, is sort of my philosophy. And I think what you're saying, and it does bring a lot more happiness and joy, especially when people appreciate it, or when you see the benefits of it too. You really directly get, oh yeah, this does support me in the long run as well.
Yeah, I'm I'm
Hmm.
I'm hoping that the ideas can appeal to the normal person, but I know for a fact I have this servant leadership personality, so that's why it obviously works for me really well. But I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be an example. Like, I really believe that being in service to others is what makes you the best version of yourself you can possibly be. But anyways, those enough of
Well,
my. Let's go ahead.
yeah. No, totally, totally. I really, I agree with that too. I really agree with that too. I mean, and it's humbling when you do that, right?
Yeah,
It's incredibly humbling.
yeah,
Hmm.
coming
And
from the mouth.
gratitude. I,
Yeah, coming from the mouth. Yeah, we got a little lag here. Coming from the mouth of two founders of organizations. I mean, obviously we both are into that. I try to relate this show as much as I can to the average person who might not live in Boulder, Colorado, or be able to go out and see nature like as intimately as you and I can, so that they can have a role in these challenges that we're facing. Yeah, which is a great transition to ask you, how do you think a typical person can support like regenerative land stewardship or regenerative practices in general?
yeah, I mean, I think just starting with themselves, like actually taking the time to make that connection. And then if you have land, being able to learn from the ecologists and the bio, like learn about the land from an ecological perspective. Also, learn like what's the history of the land, like who are the ancestral tribes that lived on the land, what's the history, what happened, and just like you would a relationship with a person, like enter into that type of relationship with the land and look at what can your role be to best support the overall health of this place. And I've been getting, I don't know, I'll share this, but I've been getting really into the rights of nature movement, which is a whole other kind of fringe thought, but it's actually something that I mean, it's not so fringe. It's something that indigenous, their perspectives of land, so it's kind of ancient thinking, but it's also something that's catching wind now. But just looking at nature as not something that you own, and that you are able to do whatever you want with, that it's a resource that's disposable for you, and so shifting the mindset around like this nature, this tree, these species, they have sovereignty and they should be free, within, I mean, and you're basically someone that has been given or inherited or bought or whatever it is, like, stewardship, guardianship of this place, right? And you can be the representative of this place, but that land really needs to have its rights respected. And it's an interesting concept because we don't, in our legislative system, there's no such thing as land not being owned. Like land has to be owned by the government, by people, by corporations, whatever it is. And so there's no such thing as returning a deed of land back to the land so that it has its own standing, right? And in
State
the court
parks?
system,
No, state park. I guess it's owned by
they're
the
owned
government.
by the government.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the court system, if an animal or a piece of land can't just file a lawsuit, if they're being polluted, if they're being harmed in some way. And so it's this whole new concept around how can land have sovereignty and have kind of representation, in the court system and legislative system. And it's happening all across the US and across the world. It's getting written into local municipalities, into country constitutions. So it's a growing movement. But I think if you're going to be working on regenerating your land, starting first with your belief around your relationship with the land and kind of looking at and inquiring about what rights are you going to honor, that your land has, like what rights of the land are you going to honor and how are you going to be a good steward and guardian of it to support its health into the future as you would your child.
That is amazing. And I love the 30 by 30 and the 55-50 proposals to protect as much land on Earth as possible. Seems like a really awesome solution to a lot of the problems we're dealing with. I think there is this I don't want to know if it's called school of thought, but we come from nature. We're not separate from nature, but there are those that believe that humans are superior and that they're above nature. And we definitely have this role where we are the stewards and we are going to decide what's going to happen. Like we're in the Anthropocene now. We are in controlling the system. And something I was thinking about at the beginning of this podcast when we were talking about the responsibility of someone who's in control of a system or in control of the environment is I'm thinking of like the Lion King, how like when Scar kills Mufasa and then 10 years later you go back and Pride Rock is completely destroyed because he's just sitting there eating all the food. So I see that as very similar to the way we're treating our planet. So I hope we can do better. Last couple questions. Just wanted to ask you your opinions about the role of nonprofit organizations versus like large for-profit institutions when it comes to fostering either regenerative policy or environmental stewardship.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I mean, I think that they serve different purposes, right?
Sure.
So nonprofits really, really are designed like our work in the OSA, like we needed a nonprofit to be able to raise funds because the people there don't have the money to pay for some of these things, and so the nonprofits really can be a vehicle that can be, an incentivizing vehicle for some to move money to places where there's not really money, right? And to support land conservation, to support social well-being for some of these communities. And then the for-profit role, is really about, is really about having some sort of service or product that people buy and they purchase, right? And there's a role for both of them. And I think that the for-profit organizations really need to analyze, like, what is their environmental footprint, with the service, with the product that they're offering, and can they ensure that they're not extracting so much that it's contributing to this imbalance on the planet right now? Can they look at how their products and their services may actually help to regenerate the planet? And I think that there are ways for all corporations to be able to analyze that and to change their practices so that they are moving towards a regenerative future, rather than being in this kind of this place of just extracting in order for their own personal gain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what it is. They're just taking from the earth, and they're benefiting, profiting, but then the earth is actually the one that's suffering, and that's going to in the long run affect everybody.
Totally.
But there are amazing corporations and for-profit businesses that are doing incredible work, and I think that's a key leverage point in creating the change that we need, is through corporations and businesses.
Mm-hmm. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't agree more. And Jennifer, it's been so delightful to talk to you today. I love how you found like something you're really passionate about, but what's really more interesting to me is that you fostered a really profound connection with somewhere you had never visited before in your life. You went to, what is it called? OSA, was it in Costa Rica?
Osa Peninsula. Yeah.
And you just
In
knew,
Costa
you're
Rica.
like, I need to work on this. This is a place that needs my help. I love people who have a calling and just follow it. So that's why it's been really cool to talk to you today. Final question is just, what advice do you have for other people who are passionate about leaving this planet better than they found it?
Yeah, just know that that you can do more than you think you can. And I think if you have vision, you have passion and purpose, like, you really can move mountains. You can achieve almost anything. And so it just takes, and then don't give up. There's so many challenges and obstacles that we have on the road. And if you believe in something, just keep persevering through. And some of the most successful people are able to stay in it long enough when a challenge hits until it shifts and you're able to go through, and yeah. And I think just, continue to connect to nature, because there's tremendous guidance and wisdom and creativity that emerges when we're in a deeply relaxed present state and, infused in nature. Because yeah, we calibrate to nature when we're out in those wild places, and it helps us to open up, to be relaxed, and this creative life force emerges. That's why some of the best designs are in nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's, so how can you tap into that to get smart and come up with solutions?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's awesome. Yeah, the best ideas come not when you're doing a million things at once, but when you're very present and you're just kind of letting your mind connect to the world around you and all your experiences. Jennifer, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I really enjoyed the
Yeah,
podcast a lot.
no, thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I enjoyed it
It's,
a lot too.
it's been an honor. All right, everybody. And of course, we will see you next Thursday. Have a fantastic weekend and peace out. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Changing the Climate. Here at Climate Change Realty, we don't just donate 50% of our net commissions to fight climate change, we also donate a full 50% of our real estate referrals. So if you or anyone else you know is looking to buy or sell a home anywhere in the USA and would like to create thousands of dollars in donations without any cost out of pocket, please visit ccrboulder.com today.